Hey, hello everyone. Bonjour, welcome. My name is Paul Keefe, business advisor here at the World Trade Centre in Winnipeg. I would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that this webinar is coming to you from Treaty 1 territory, traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Thank you for joining our webinar, A Human-Centered Approach to Customer Service, Building Meaningful Connections for a Better Customer Service Experience, which will be presented by Ben Dueck. Before we begin, I just want to share a few housekeeping items. Please send all of your webinar questions directly to the chat box at the top of your screen, and Ben will try to answer as many as he can during a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. For all logistical questions, please send them directly to the chat box, and I will answer your questions as soon as possible. And lastly, you'll also receive a PDF copy and recording of this presentation within the next week. Now it's time to start our webinar. I would like to introduce you to Ben Dueck. Ben Dueck is passionate about leadership development and helping people grow their impact. His past experience includes entrepreneurship, nonprofit leadership, fundraising, and more. He is the Director of Leadership and Sales for Crestcom Manitoba and the President of Cantera Leadership. He is a Gallup certified Clifton Strengths coach and has a Master of Arts in Leadership degree. Ben is born and raised Manitoban who grew up in a family of entrepreneurs where his interest in leadership development was born. For the past 20 years, he has worked with leaders in both the business and nonprofit world to help them become more successful. He currently lives in Niverville with his wife and 3 children. Welcome, Ben. The floor is all yours.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for that kind introduction. As I start, I think back to a specific customer service experience that I regularly think of. And it's interesting because it's happened over 20 years ago, around 20 years ago. And I was in a extremely long lineup at a fast food restaurant. And there was some kind of problem at the till, right? So that's why the line was so long. It was just going very, very slowly. I was far too far back in the line, and I probably just should have left, but I guess I wanted my food. And so I patiently waited and waited and waited to get through the line. It probably took over 20 minutes. Now, I mean, fast food, that's pretty slow, right? I got to the front. I was second from the front. The person in front of me, I still remember this. I don't remember the exact details, but I remember the rough scenario of what happened. They had a coupon that they wanted to use. This was back in the day of coupons, of course. Now it's all electronic. This was a paper coupon. And they presented the coupon, and the cashier at the till basically just refused to accept the coupon. It wasn't valid for whatever reason. And this person in front of me was just extremely annoyed and frustrated by this. You can only imagine, right? They waited in line basically the same amount of time as me, over 20 minutes, 25 minutes, whatever it was. They had this coupon. They were going to cash this coupon in to use it for their fast food meal, and rejected. They were frustrated. I don't recall if they actually still bought a meal or they just left. And I got to the front there, and I said, like, I don't know if you have the capability to do this, but couldn't you have just like given them something for free, right? Just give them something to help redeem that experience, because all of us are frustrated. I know it's not your fault, but it would just have made went a long way. And this cashier, and of course, this is a young person, probably, one of their first jobs. I didn't take it out on them, but I could tell they were frustrated too, right? They were frustrated with the situation. That was out of their control, what was going on and how they handled it. But I still remember that over 20 years later, this small customer service experience and how it just felt so harsh. And that fast food restaurant, that franchise that I was at, and I'm not going to tell you who it was, but I rarely go back there again. And not because I wouldn't like their food or whatever, but there's something about that experience that has stuck with me, where that's not been a priority when I choose a place to go. And I don't eat as much fast food as I used to. I probably still eat more than I should. I don't go there. And I think that just helps me set the stage for what we're going to be talking about here today. And Paul did a great introduction on it already, a human-centered approach to customer service. And ultimately, isn't that what we really want, right? We want to feel like we are being treated like humans. We want to feel like we're able to interact with a human. And so as we talk about things today, we're going to dive into that. So welcome here to this webinar today. There's going to be a couple times, just to give you all a heads up, that I will probably ask for some interaction. I'll say, hey, put something in the chat or pop something in the chat. So if you're on a computer or a device where you're going to be able to do that, I'd love for you to be prepared for that, because when I ask for that interaction, if no one puts anything in the chat, then it always feels like just like a dead weight on me as a presenter. So that's my ask of you when I ask for some thoughts from you, to pop them in the chat at that time. And like Paul said, if you have questions about things, pop those in the chat too. I probably won't dig into the questions as we go here, but as later on, we'll make sure we come back to those as well. So let's dive in a little bit to our human-centered approach to customer service. And let me kind of set the framework here a little bit. And I think it's pretty interesting. So there's a study done a couple of years ago, about a year ago, where it just talks about some of the facts. Hey, customer service and experiences that don't go well impacts the bottom line, right? It's not just this thing that, hey, if we do it or not, it doesn't really make a difference. Just imagine in wherever you work, whatever job you have, if your revenue dropped 10% this next year, right? Huge. You'd have to make some big changes in the organization. Vice versa, imagine if your revenue increased 10% in a year. Huge value as well. So I think it's important for us to remember that. And 2/3 of consumers have switched brands in the past year. Again, this was in 2022, so just kind of coming out of the pandemic, a year or so after the pandemic. And I think that may have triggered some of these kind of shifts as well. But consumers are not necessarily staying as loyal as they used to be. And part of that is that the cost to change companies is getting close to zero, right? It used to be, 20, 30, 40 years ago, that to change a company that you bought from involved time, effort. You'd have to drive somewhere. Sometimes you'd have to drive like hours to get to a competitor in order to buy the same products that you could buy locally. Sometimes, and so the loyal side of things, sometimes you didn't really have a choice. Your loyalty was just dependent on the region. Regions don't matter much anymore. We can all go online, of course, click a button or two, and purchase something instantaneously. So the cost is getting close to zero. And of course, with the economic challenges that we've seen in the last number of years, we know that consumers are wanting more from the dollar they spend. Right, we're seeing all this aspects of shrinkflation, right, where you're shrinking the packaging and all that kind of stuff, where we see that as consumers, and we're like, whoa, like, what's going on? My dollar doesn't go the same distance that it used to go. So we need to become, as business owners, as people who work in different businesses, we need to become aware of that tension that is there. And there's a term that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. It's called the Age of Outrage. And I think if anything is true, if you think of the last number of years, definitely the idea of outrage within the marketplace has become more prominent. The world has become more divisive in many ways, unfortunately. And that impacts our businesses for sure. We'll talk about this age of outrage more as we go forward, but I think what the key thing to keep in mind is here that we have a lot of these, the consumer stress or customer stress. If you think of the world that people are in, right, the pressures that we're on in many different ways, and then we have a lot of the stress that we're experiencing, business stress as well. And those are kind of hand in hand in many ways, right? If it was a Venn diagram, you'd see crossover between customer stress and business stress. So as a customer, it's becoming harder and harder to be a consumer and to live within the economy we have. You want your dollar to go further. You're under the stress, of your job. Maybe you're under the stress of coming out of the pandemic, even though it's a couple of years. It's been a couple of years already. It's still after effects of that stress of family, all those kind of different things. The stress that's there. Then we have this business stress where we need to make our dollar go further. We have cut back on costs and try to increase our revenues, and we have these ups and downs in the economy, and basically it ends up being this big explosion of stress that we are seeing. And so there's even a finer line than ever as to what customers expect with the money that they're spending and the products and services they receive and the interactions that they're looking for. So as we dive into that here today, that's kind of setting the stage for things. I'd love if you are able to, just pop in the chat, just in general, what type of industry are you involved in? I'd love to see that in the chat so I know kind of what kind of customer service. Are you in, the hospitality? Are you in, manufacturing? Are you a service-based industry? Just if you are able to, just pop that in there. I'd love to see what types of businesses are represented here. You don't need to give me their business name, but just kind of, so we've got some retail there. That's a great place for customer service. Oh, some really gluten-free food manufacturing. I should talk to you later, Amanda. We mostly gluten-free in our family here, so it's great. Good. We're getting a few here, a few different ones. So we're getting a pretty wide variety. This is awesome. I love this. Good. Okay. So if for those of you listening, keep popping into the chat there. I'll try to keep my eyes open there as much as I can. And before we dive too far into what we're going to be covering today, Paul already gave a introduction, so I won't dive into this a lot. But my name is Ben Dueck. I live out here in Niverville. A bunch of stuff there on me on the screen there. It talks about me. I always love to just say when I pop this screen on, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love making connections on LinkedIn, especially people if you're local to Manitoba here, like most of you probably are. Would love to be connected. So if you just look for Ben Dueck on LinkedIn, you'll be able to find me. And I'm part of Crestcom, and I won't dive into a lot of Crestcom stuff. I think you're going to get a copy of the slide deck, so you can dig in deeper if you want. But today I want to kind of cover three kind of general objectives. One is I want to help understand today's customer service challenges. We've talked about that a little bit. We'll dive into that a little bit more. I want to talk about principles of great customer service. So what are the principles? Because we have a wide variety of industries here, I can't tell you how to specifically do customer service in your business, right? Like we're going to have a big difference between retail customer service, for example, and hospitality customer service. But the principles behind customer service that we're going to be talking about today should apply regardless of what industry is represented here today. And then the third thing that I want to do is talking about the role of a great employee experience within the realm of customer service. And the general idea there is that if your employees are engaged, they're going to provide greater customer service. And we'll dive into that a little bit as well. Thanks for everyone who's been popping those answers into the chat. By the way, it really does help me understand kind of where you're coming from with your background. So let's talk a little bit about today's customer and some of the trends that we're seeing. Now, most of these trends and stats that I'm sharing with you are relatively recent. They are from a study that came out last year, but it still applies for our time here today as well. And it's pulled from, if you want to dig in even further, there's Qualtrics XM Institute has a lot of stats here on this that you can find that I found really helpful in understanding some of this. So if you look at today's customer snapshot, some of these things we've already talked about, but some interesting stats, right? For us as business leaders, we need to understand that 63% of consumers said companies need to get better at listening to their feedback. Isn't that one of the most frustrating things? That if you give feedback to someone and they don't listen to it? Pick any relationship, not just a customer and business relationship, but me and my friend Paul were trying to chat, and I was trying to give Paul some feedback here, and Paul, would listen but do nothing about the feedback I gave him. That kind of makes me feel like he doesn't care about me, and vice versa, right? So feedback done well, of course, is valuable. Now, as businesses, that can be a frustration for some of your consumers. 62% of consumers said that businesses need to care more about them, right? We like to feel cared for, and 60% of consumers would buy more if businesses just treated them better, right? We could all think of stories, and I'm going to ask you to think of some stories later as poor customer service, right? And part of that relates to just that human connection that we feel is missed in a lot of those times. The study just kind of came out with a few key takeaways. I'll share some of those here with you. Customers have had enough and they're willing to walk, right? Again, the cost of switching is lower than ever. It's almost zero. My time even isn't affected. In fact, sometimes it's easier for me to switch, especially with online possibilities. It becomes easier for me to switch than to actually go to maybe shop at your location. Especially if I've had poor service, it would be challenging for me to want to come back. So they also say toss out the old business plans. The old business plans are based on the old way of doing business, and yet the world has changed. And they also suggest consumers will stop engaging unless you take action. So that's what are the practical steps that you're willing to take. And they also suggest that to treat customers as people and not commodities. And that's really the focus of where we're going today. What does it mean to treat customers as people and not commodities? Perhaps some of the stuff we're going to talk about today, you're going to be like, this isn't rocket science. Well, it isn't rocket science. We're here to really just, sometimes one of the best things we can do is to remind ourselves of what's the most important thing, and then make small changes based on what the most important thing is. I like this graphic that they provided as well. Obviously prices and fees, that big 50%. This is where they ask, where do companies need to improve according to consumers? 50% say, well, we want better prices and fees. I mean, that doesn't surprise me. Maybe it surprised me that it's not higher, right? We all want better prices. We want better fees for stuff that we do. But the next biggest bubble is at 43%, customer service support. 43% say, hey, the place that I work with needs better customer service and support. And the flip side of all this, we've talked about the negative side of things. I think the flip side of this is the other piece here. Consumers are 3.5 times more likely to purchase from a business after a positive experience. And I think that's true, right? I find myself doing that a lot more. And I'm going to share a story, a positive story, shortly. I shared the negative one to kick off our webinar here today, but I'm going to share a positive one shortly that has definitely influenced my interactions with this business that I had this interaction with. And people want to be heard. They want to feel like a person. They want to interact with you in ways that they prefer, and they want to feel like they're getting their money's worth. And really what that all points to is customer loyalty. And the best customers, we know this, are loyal customers, right? Anyone here in this room, if you could say, what kind of customer do you want? You want a loyal customer. I think we can all agree on that. And so we need to figure out how can we build that loyalty in this new world that we're in this new way of doing business. And guess what, people? It's going to be shifting even more in the next number of years. When we think of things like AI, how is AI going to impact business? How is AI going to impact expectations from people? There's going to be a huge trend and a huge incoming shift towards using AI in as many ways as possible. And yet, the power of human connection is still going to be strong and needed. There's wiring in how we interact with people that is based on just that human interaction. We know that, for example, if you hang out with people that are health conscious people, you become more health conscious because there's the power of that human connection with how we're wired, for example. We know that when we hang out with happier people, we become happier. And then if you relate that to our role in running our businesses and customer interaction, it still is the same way. So I mentioned earlier the term, the age of outrage. So I want to dive into this a little bit more because I think this is really important because some of the trends that we see in this age of outrage, and this is from an article in Harvard Business Review from Karthik Ramana, and it's called The Age of Outrage. So if you want to Google that and look that up, you can find the exact article to dive in deeper because I don't think we're going to have enough time to get into all of this. I'm going to give it a pretty rough overview. But the age of outrage basically highlights how people in general, today's customers are unhopeful about the future, right? There's a lot of pessimism about the way things go. They feel the game is rigged. Have you heard that? Like the game is rigged, whether it's housing prices or whatever the case is, right? And there's a lot of this us versus them mentality that we've been growing. And sometimes that us versus them mentality, the them becomes the world of business, right? It's I'm just against all of this, these business people and stuff like that. And that's a dangerous us versus them, but yet there are some people thinking that. So we need to be aware of this outrage that's out there and the 5 steps that they suggest in this article. And I'm going to highlight them here and we'll dig into a couple of them. We don't have time for all of them. Turn down the temperature, analyze the outrage, shape and bound your responses, understand your power to mobilize others, and renew resilience. If there's any of those 5 that you really wish I would talk about that I don't talk about, again, you can find the article online and dig in deeper, but I'm going to highlight a few more things. Oh, look at that, Paul. Magical Paul. I saw pop in the chat. He's a magician. So you can find the article there and dig in. But when I talk about the 2 that I really want to highlight, especially this first one, turn down the temperature. And one of the things that I really want to mention here, we know for all of us, and this is just the way that we're wired as humans, in stressful situations, we're not at our best. Right? When it matters most, we're often at our worst. How often have you wished that, or said in your head something like this, oh, I wish I would have said blank. And this is after the fact, right? But in the moment, you didn't say it. Or the opposite, I wish I wouldn't have said blank. Because the way that happens is the way our brains work is when we're put into a stressful situation, we get into that fight, flight, fawn, or freeze type of situation. And our brains start to get into that. It's like survival mode. So whether we are the business or the customer, oftentimes customer service tends to relate to these stressful moments. And yet in these stressful moments, the customer is coming not at their best. You're probably then responding and not at your best. And the situation has this potential to just escalate. So we have to remember when there's, when a customer is dealing with a problem and a customer has a concern, we have to remember that at least one person in that situation is not at their best. Maybe we're okay. Maybe we've been able to keep our temperature down, but their temperature might be up. So how can we provide a safe place for this? Let me pop a few things up here on the screen. We won't highlight all of these, but the idea of these customer scripts is kind of what I'm getting at too, right? So our scripts relate to how we then start to instinctively react. Those scripts are based on how the world works around us or the experiences that we've had, or for example, repeated exposure to social media stuff that might influence how we think. And when we start seeing some of those scripts coming into play, it influences how we respond. That relates, down to this behavioral science. We're going to refer to behavioral science a couple times here today, but really the idea behind it is that our responses are shaped even before we walk through that door because of how we're wired. That doesn't excuse the behaviors that we have. It helps explain them, but it does not excuse them. So when we're looking at trying to create a safe environment, we have to remember that as much as we think that we are logical, rational beings, we actually aren't. The science around behavioral science, the science says that we are emotional beings. One of the stories I really like about that, just in even how we make decisions, a story that relates to this, there was a gentleman that had a brain injury, and the part of his brain that experienced emotions was damaged. And so he couldn't choose between a red pen or a blue pen. It took him 30 minutes to choose which pen he wanted to use. And part of that is emotions. Just imagine, like, why does someone like chocolate ice cream over vanilla ice cream? There's an emotion tied in with that decision. If you walk down a cereal aisle, like, sure, maybe you think, oh, this flavor tastes better, this flavor might taste better, but in general, there's many, many different options. A lot of times we're driven because of our emotional response in that moment. Oh, I used to buy a lot of mini wheats, by the way. I feel really good about buying these mini wheats. It's an emotional response that I have. And when we're disappointed as a customer, that emotional response is what is triggered. So that's kind of, we need to create those safe spaces. I want to, share a little bit then about the analyze the outrage. And I share this picture here, not because I want to highlight or get into a divisive discussion around the truckers convoy, but the truckers convoy, for example, there was a lot of outrage during the pandemic. That's one example, right? And again, this isn't me saying, hey, one way or the other. But when you think of those factors that I shared earlier about despair about the future, feeling that the game is rigged, feeling othered, right? The us versus them, I think that triggers a lot of that outrage that people start to experience, whether it's truckers convoy or whether it's someone walking into your location with a complaint. It's rooted in a lot of what's going on. So we need to be very aware of how we can overcome that and really analyze what the root is. And really that's the key question here to consider. What is the root of the outrage? Not the symptom. We often focus on the symptom of the outrage. Oh, like, your whatever you bought broke. Sure, that could be the symptom. Could also be the root, but there's often other roots. That was a bad example for a different root, perhaps. But what is the root of the outrage, and what were the unmet expectations? I expected X, I did not get X, I got Y. And where is that difference in what people wanted? I'll jump into a quick example from. Sorry, I jumped too far here. This is the what action will you take, shaping and bounding your responses. This is the example I want to share about the story from Nestle in 2015, Nestle India. They over 100 plus year presence in India, and there was a routine test in a government food safety lab, and they found traces of MSG in its instant noodles product, Maggie. That's the product name. Later tests from the government also indicated high levels of lead in these noodles. Okay, so here's two challenges, MSG and Maggi noodles. The product was marketed as a health food and targeted children in India. And so it came under scrutiny. You don't want, especially lead in your food. Nestle explained that although no added MSG was technically true, the product did contain naturally occurring glutamates. I'm not a food science person, so I'm just sharing what I've read here. The lead content, Nestle said, no, like our own tests said that the product safety, it's safe, type of thing, and said that the results were, poor procedures at the government labs, et cetera, et cetera. But in general, the officials, the public did not appreciate this. And the press piled on. Nearly 80% of the market share, lost nearly 80% of the market share in instant noodles in India, contributing to a 15% drop in stock price. Eventually, Nestle withdrew, relaunched a product with the label no added MSG. The lead concerns, just so everyone knows, it turned out were indeed unfounded. But in the moment, they just kind of made excuses for it. And so I love these 4 questions that are good to ask when we try to think, how will we respond? Are we directly responsible for this outrage? Yes or no? Will our inaction exacerbate it? Yes or no? Is acting to alleviate the outrage part of our implicit contract with stakeholders, or do we want it to be? And only if the answer to these 4 questions is no, should you act, right? So most of the time, we often just say, oh, it's not my problem. I don't need to act. But sometimes the answer is yes to one of those 4 questions, and we don't even realize it. We don't even realize what the expectations are. And it can really cause big problems in our situations. I'm going to just quickly pop up. We won't talk about the IKEA one. Actually, we're going to leave that, leave out the reference point. Again, these slides will be available for you to look at. Understanding your power to mobilize others. These are the steps that are covered in that article. But I want to get to some really key things that I want to make sure we have time for as we go through here. I think this principle still applies, though, when it comes to what we want to try to now start moving towards, right? The human-centered customer service is focused on fire prevention, not just firefighting. The world of customer service, one of the challenges that we come into when we're trying to interact is that we often are very reactive, right? And so I want to help us now start to set the stage for what does it mean to be proactive as best as we can. And I'll share some really cool examples of some organizations out there that are doing this. So I want to talk about some principles around how to create a great customer experience, especially that human-centered approach. Now, as we think about being proactive, and here's some of the principles here. I want people to know me, right? So if I'm thinking of what do I want from a human-centered approach, know me. What are my preferences? What businesses do I have? Now, depending on, again, what your industry is, how can you know me more effectively? The more you know, the more you can interact with your customers, especially as we shift a lot of our interactions into things like social media or emails or different things like that. Are there ways that you can really fine-tune your messaging to your customers? Generic messages feel generic, right? When I get a generic message my way through an email, I can tell it's pretty generic, that it's just trying to hit as many people with the broadest brush as possible. How can you tweak your messaging to be more specific? I want you to respect me, but more importantly, respect my time. Right? I don't have hours to sit on a phone. I don't have hours to wait for an answer. I don't have hours to wait in line. Although I did this back in 23 years ago, right? The $5 meal at a fast food restaurant. It's not $5 anymore, unfortunately. I want you to meet me, engage the customer in my preferred method, whatever method it is. Maybe I don't like emails. Maybe I rather would want a text message or whatever the case is. Or maybe I just don't want you to interact with me at all. And when you interact with me, it's actually going to frustrate me. I want you to empower me, empower your customer, give them the ability to resolve their issues when you're able to. We'll talk about more practical things as we move forward here too. So what that could look like. Remember me, during transitions. Remember who I am. Whether you're changing something, whether I'm shifting something, whether it's like changing my plan or whatever the case is in different situations. I also want you to support me, anticipate my needs, proactively notify me, and assure me that you are there for me when I need you. I think one good example of this, and I'll share this story from a local, from Southeast Manitoba here, a local organization, local company. This was from a couple of years ago, but I love sharing this story. I've shared it many times. And so you can imagine the power of an interaction like this that covers a lot of these elements out of these 7. So it was during the pandemic, and of course, lots of what we were doing was shifting to ordering online. And my wife and I, we order a number of natural products like supplements and different things like that. And now we can go in person. And so we ordered online for the first time from a company in Southeast Manitoba, Good and Natural, their company based out of Steinbach. And we didn't know what to expect. And but the product came a little while later, and on the invoice or the packing slip or whatever you call these papers, they wrote a handwritten message to us, handwritten, signed, and also not only a handwritten note, but they included a free 30-day supply of vitamin D, and they wrote about it. It was very, very clearly handwritten. It wasn't one of those fake, like, you can print something that looks like handwriting or photocopy something that looked like handwriting. It was very clear. It even has my name on it. Hi, Ben. Thank you for purchasing it from us. And that has stood out to me for the last 3 or 4 years. I've shared this story many times. That was a very personalized connection to me. So what for you are ways, small ways that you can, is there a Good and Natural person on here? Look at that, is Leanne. Oh my goodness, my mind is blown. Leanne is on here. Oh, that threw me off, Leanne, but hey, I'm glad you're on here. So you can see a small little thing like that, and there you go, Leanne. It's reinforcing what you've done at Good and Natural there, that it stood out to me. Keep doing it if you have stopped. So that's one story that I want to share with you. Okay, so let's keep going here and talk a little bit more about the difference between expectations and perception. Okay, so when we're talking about what a customer expects, that is often the key focal point of excellent customer service versus broken customer service or customer interactions. The difference being that if my perception of what I expected is off, or if it's exceeded. So when we look at where sources are coming from, where customer expectations are coming from, really there's a couple different ways, right? Business done with you before. So if I have done business with you before, like Good and Natural, hey, I'm going to use you as an example for the rest of the time here. Now I have an expectation, right, that they're going to treat me well. And Leanne, every time I've came back to the store or bought stuff online, it's been that way. So it's carried through. The expectation that I've had has been met because I've done business with you. That has helped me set a good expectation. Vice versa, if I would have had an expectation like this fast food example I gave you at the beginning, my expectations on that fast food restaurant are very low because of what happened. And in general, fast food, we probably don't have high expectations anyway. Previous positive experiences with other companies. So now, when I go and shop at other, health food supplement locations, I'm always in the back of my mind keeping the Good and Natural experience in my head. So that expectation that I have of that location will always be measured against the best expectation I've had in other places. We see this a lot in restaurants. We see this a lot in hospitality with hotels, where we compare our experiences at one restaurant or one hotel with the other one we were just at. Oh, it wasn't as good as this night I had over there. It wasn't as good as there. And we start to measure all of our expectations that way. And then our expectations set by our marketing that we send out. So here's a question for all of you to consider. Are the expectations you are setting in your marketing being met by customer interactions? Or is it just your marketing material? We need to make sure that that is aligned. Now, I don't suggest you reduce your marketing expectations so that your expectations are different. I suggest you increase the customer experience if there's a disconnect. You may need to move a little bit each way, but try to align your perception that you have with the marketing. And really, perception is all there is. Perception is reality, right? Imagine going to a restaurant and you get your host is bringing you to the table. They pull out your chair. And before you sit down, you see under the table, and the floor under the table is dirty, empty cracker packages, there's crumbs. What is that perception now? Or what is your perception shift to? Oh, potentially the kitchen is dirty. Potentially the bathrooms are dirty. And even though the kitchen could be pristine, my perception now has shifted. Or a positive example, there's a lot of, if anyone here is from like an automotive dealership, a car dealership, and when I bring my car in for service, a lot of car dealerships, what they'll do is they'll wash your car after they've done the service on it. What does that tell me now when I show up and my car is all freshly washed and shiny? Well, as long as they have washed this, the car looks so nice, they must have done a nice job with my car. Maybe all they did was wash it, right? But it tells me, my perception is that they did a good job. I'm sure that they do actually do the work as well. So, the perception of what I see needs to be factored in. So customer satisfaction occurs when perceptions match expectations, okay? When perceptions match expectations. That's when we start to get satisfied or exceed expectations. So what do you think your customers' current perceptions are of your workplace? That's an important question for you to ask. And are we meeting or exceeding them? It reminds me of a story. There was a airline executive who was flying on his own airline, and he was flying alongside a passenger, who pulled down their coffee tray, and there were some coffee stains. Not this many. This is an exaggerated example, but there's a coffee ring stain on the tray. And this individual didn't know that the executive was sitting right next to them, and she said, "Oh, I wonder if they're maintaining those engines as much as they're cleaning these coffee trays." That shift for that airline executive was transformational in how they approached small things like coffee stains. They saw a coffee stain, they imagined poor engine maintenance. That's not what we want. What are your coffee stains? Where are people needing to see a shift? Maybe it's something like a customer goes to our website and sends us an email and we don't reply for like 3 days or 4 days or never. That could be a coffee stain. Maybe they get put on hold and have to wait beyond kind of what they would have expected. I've had that happen to me, right? It sours the rest of my experience with them. Maybe an incorrect invoice could be a coffee stain. Maybe we say we're going to ship on Tuesday, we don't ship until Thursday. That's a coffee stain. So what are your coffee stains? Those small things that speak beyond the small. We have to remember how human brains work, the science of human behavior. Those small things start to have longer interactions. We've got a couple of minutes left. I want to talk about the next level of this step and shifting the customer experience. And if you've ever heard of this guy named Darren Ross, I want to talk about Darren Ross. He runs Service Freak Hospitality, which is a company that also runs a hotel called Magic Castle Hotel in West Hollywood. And this is the approach that he has empowered his organization to pursue. This is kind of the approach that he has taken in general, but there's some very specific examples I want to share with you. And this is actually a organization that is referred to in the book, The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath. They've written some really great books if you want to look those up. And he talks about popsicle moments. And what I mean by that is that they have a popsicle hotline at their hotel. So down by the pool, they have a red phone. And if you pick up that red phone and you hop on it, someone at the other end is going to say, "Hello, popsicle hotline, how may I help you?" And you can request popsicles to be brought to you. These are free complimentary popsicles. They bring it out in a fancy tray and they deliver popsicles to you by the poolside. Exceeding expectations, right? Who expects that when they go to a hotel? Well, now anyone who's went to the Magic Castle Hotel will. And every hotel they go to afterwards, they're going to say, "Oh, they didn't bring me my popsicles. They didn't even have that." So he encourages the idea of creating a moment and multiple moments for the people as a part of their organization. Staff are encouraged to come up with these unique ways to drive a moment home. For example, if they know their guests are going off to the Marilyn Monroe Museum, the hotel staff are going to put a framed photo of Marilyn Monroe in their hotel room while they're gone, with a note that is obviously pretended to be written by her, that says, "Welcome to the area. So glad you're here, Marilyn Monroe." A framed photo in their room. Imagine that moment when you've just come back from the Marilyn Monroe Museum. You walk into your room and there's a framed photo there for you. So what are your popsicle moments? Can you create some popsicle moments? Now, it might be, for some of you, that might be really, hard to imagine what that could be. Maybe it's hard in a place like, I don't know, Priscilla said you're in healthcare or payroll. I don't know what that would look like for a popsicle moment. But for you, consider that. What would it be like if I was someone who was interacting with you to have a popsicle moment? We're going to sprint to the finish line here in the next 5 minutes, and then we're going to have some time for Q&A. And so again, if you have any questions, either pop them in the chat or now, or even wait a couple of minutes to do so. I want to talk about the third piece of what we've been talking about here, and then I'll sum it all up. And I want to talk about shifting the employee experience. This is such an important piece. We know the statistics say, the studies say, that when employees are engaged, customers get better customers experiences. It'd be really difficult, even in those popsicle moments, if the people on the team are not engaged, not bought in, not excited about working there, for that to come through as an actual popsicle moment. It's going to come through as a melted popsicle moment, which is then even more disappointing. So we need to recognize that the employee experience creates the customer experience. And really the goal is to inspire employees to want to act in a certain way and then reward that behavior. There's some simple, really cool ways that you can increase engagement with your team. In fact, some of the statistics say that if all you did was encourage your team more, encourage your individuals more, they would work harder. Just encourage them more. One of the things that comes up a lot when I'm interacting with businesses is I ask them, like how often do you think you specifically, uniquely, individually encourage someone? And they think that what they've done is a lot higher than what is often the truth, because we overestimate how much we've actually encouraged someone very specifically about something they've been doing. So we need to be very good at being encouragers and continue to do things with, like, rewarding behavior doesn't need to be financial. That can be a part of it. But we need to help train them as well. We need to help measure the results of what we're doing as well, so they can all see how they are a part of something bigger than themselves and they start to enjoy it. Imagine being at that hotel with those popsicle moments, how exciting that is to see, to be a part of that and be like, that is so fun to bring those popsicle moments. That is so fun to create that Marilyn Monroe thing. They're encouraged to create these types of moments. Can you help your team to see that as part of their job to do that? But really, you have to increase your engagement. This slide here, you can read through when you get the slide deck. But really, the summary of this all is what your employees experience inside of the organization is directly felt by your customers outside of the organization. I want to share one group of principles that relate to everything we've talked about, whether it's employee engagement, whether it's customer service, whether it's whatever the case is. Gallup, one of the leading companies in the world around how they measure employee engagement and help companies grow and their impact around really just organizational development. They did a poll back in 2005 through 2008. They did a formal study to determine the average person's opinion about leadership. They didn't talk to experts, historians, CEOs, celebrities, and politicians. They talked to the normal person. And although this was a leadership study, these principles apply to your whole organization, to even how you focus on customer service. They had over 10,000 responses. And what they asked them is, describe a leader that had the most positive influence on their lives daily and list 3 words that best describe what that person contributed in their life. They studied the 25 most commonly mentioned words. And they came up with these, and then they bucketed these 25 words into four buckets: trust, compassion, stability, and hope. Trust, compassion, stability, and hope. Hope is probably the one that I want to highlight the most here in our webinar. The power of creating a future that they can see and understand. If you think of that concept in light of customer service, how can you create a future that people can see and understand when they work with you? So even when there's a problem, what does that look like? And there's an example. Consider this interaction. This is shared by Simon Sinek, who shared this. I'm stealing it from him. Imagine these 2 different scenarios. One, you want to change your flight home because at the end of a business trip, you realize, hey, I can go home a day earlier. My thing ended the day sooner than I thought. I'm going to call the airline and see if I can get a flight home early. So you call in, you get put on hold, and finally get to speak with a representative. And your request to get a ticket home one day earlier goes something like this: I'm sorry, we can't do that. Oh, okay, why? Your ticket doesn't let me do that, so I just can't. Okay, so quick interaction could be really frustrating. Versus, what if the customer service representative says something like this: I'd love to help you out with getting you home early. I think that'd be great to see you be able to be back with your family sooner. Typically, the type of ticket you've purchased doesn't allow me to make that change, but let me try a few things to see if I can make it happen for you. Give me a second. I'm going to check the computer directly. Okay, tap, tap, tap. Okay, that didn't work. I'm going to see if I can change the type of ticket you have so I can make the shift, and then maybe we can make that. No, that didn't work either. Let me talk to my supervisor. I'm going to go talk to them. I'm going to put you on hold for a little bit, and I'll get right back to you. I really want to get you home earlier if we can. Okay, they go away. I'm sorry, sir. It really seems that we can't make that change for you today. I really wish I could have gotten you home earlier to see your family, but just the way that the system is and the way that your ticket is, it doesn't allow me to do that. Now, you don't always get what you want when you're a customer, right? But just imagine the difference in those interactions. What are you going to walk away feeling? If you want to find an interesting story around this, United Breaks Guitars. Back in 2009, Dave Carroll was flying home on a United flight. He's a musician, saw his guitars getting damaged. Cost him $1,200 to fix the guitar. United refused. We're not going to fix that. So he wrote a song called United Breaks Guitars. As of today, that video has over 22 million views. It is estimated that United Airlines lost 10% of its market share as a result, costing shareholders roughly $180 million. Customer service does not need to be perfect. It needs to be human. We need to remember trust, compassion, stability, and hope. Do your interactions with your customers build trust, compassion, stability, and hope, or tear away those four things? You want to build human, empathetic relationships with customers and employees. Words and attitudes are free. And I'd love for you to create or repair powerful moments in your interactions. So as we wrap up and as we leave some time for Q&A, I wanted to leave one final challenge here with you. What will you do? Inspiration isn't the goal. If you felt, well, I might be overestimating what I say, but if you felt inspired or encouraged, great. Transformation is the goal. When you come to these kind of things, I always encourage people, take one small thing and integrate it into your workplace starting as soon as you can, hopefully today, or even starting tomorrow. Maybe that is working with your team to define these moments of excellence. Maybe it is committing to personalizing one of your interactions with your customers. Write a note on the bottom of your invoice you send out or your packing slip. Maybe it's highlighting a customer of the week with your team, right? Where you say, hey, here's one of our favorite customers that we have that comes here. Or maybe you highlight with your team a customer service interaction of the week. Something like that. So that kind of wraps up my time here with you today for this part, but there is going to be some Q&A time as well. If you want to find out more about the work that I do with Crestcom or Cantera Leadership, happy to talk to you about that. We have free leadership skills workshops available. You can talk to me about that. We have a Crestcom podcast, or you can just look at our website and find us at crestcom.com, or reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to have a connection with you on LinkedIn. Just even if you just say, hey, saw you at the webinar, it'd be great. And I'd also invite you, before Paul jumps in here, I'm doing 2 more parts of this leadership series, once in November, once in December. So if I'd invite you to come back and join me with the World Trade Center webinar series that I'm going to be involved in. So thanks again.
Awesome presentation, Ben. I think you kind of inspiration to transformation.
Oh, something happened, Paul. Hold on, I can't hear you.
Oh, hello.
There, now I got you.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah, I was just saying, like, I think what you said at the end there, where it's about going from inspiration to transformation, that's so huge, because with a lot of these topics, it's so easy to look over. But when you can think about something as tactical as, like, say, a popsicle moment or something, this can become a differentiator within your product and service. Because a lot of people get caught up in the thing that they're selling, when sometimes the customer's buying into this brand and they're buying into the people behind it. So if you can increase that customer service touch, that could be the reason why someone might go to you versus another competitor, even though you're selling the exact same thing. So I just wanted to mention that. And I had an example. I think when you're touching on, you had a stat about there's like the 50% are gonna, they wish they changed the price, the company changed, or the 43% was on the customer service improved. There was a few years ago where I purchased that. I buy all my clothes online, and there was an online jean company in Vancouver, British Columbia. I think they're called Doer Jeans. Really great product. And when I bought them, it was my first time buying these jeans from them. I got a size, a waist was too small. And you have to think, like, when I had to return them, shipping something back becomes, it's not even just the customer experience with Doer. Now it's with UPS. It's me trying to schedule time out of my day to go do it. So it was an interesting experience, because all they wanted was the second that you basically got confirmation from UPS, email them, then immediately they're going to send you a new pair. So there's really no loss in time, maybe just a little bit. And in your head, you're kind of thinking, yeah, okay, but that literally happened. Like right when I was leaving the parking lot, basically right away, I got that confirmation, new pair of jeans are on the way. And within like 2 days, I had the right size of jeans. And I still buy jeans from them to this day. And honestly, because of that experience and the customer service aspect. So just wanted to kind of have that little example.
Yeah, no, it's a good example. Yeah.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Here to Ben's here for you. What would you say is like one of the most like, I guess, low-hanging fruits that someone in a retail space could do to improve their customer service? We have a lot of people, retail, food and beverage, things like that.
Yeah, I'd be curious if there are people in the chat have thoughts around that to even pop that in the chat. But I think when I think of great, customer service even in the world of retail, it's those small things that you do, right? Where and depending on what kind of retail location you're in, but some retail locations, the ones that I feel like I've connected with the most, some of them even just know my name, right? Because I come in there a few times, right? And they like call me by name. That can be something that might be hard to do sometimes with depending on, again, what type of retail. But it's trying to find people love feeling like it's a different experience. So what's one small thing that you can do that does that? That's going to make a big difference already.
Yeah, no, that's a great tip.
And any retail people in the chat, pop what you guys do there as well.
Oh, we got one here.
Yeah.
So Amanda, how can you inspire a behind the scenes / people in the production side of things, bring them to understand our customer interactions? Ooh, that's a great question.
That's a fantastic question. And I think I might have skipped one of the slides. I think I even had it on one of my slides and I have to go back and double check, but like everyone's involved in customer service, right? Whether it's the production side or the frontline people. And so I think that's a very important question. I think the key thing relates to the idea of this whole organizational health in general. Like what is the difference we're trying to make within our customer? What are the difference we're trying to make within the organization? And then make sure we're pulling that back and talking to the production people around how their involvement connects to the big goal of the organization. So when you put this widget together, what you're doing is you're actually impacting the customer in the front lines. You just need to have a lot of those kind of stories, conversations, highlight, a customer experience with that team in the back. If you had a good review, like share a review every week with people in the back. Hey, you're a part of making this review happen. The more you talk about it, the more they're going to think about it on that daily basis. Yeah, so good question. I'm not sure if that quite answers it, but that would be my thought, just talking about the end result with them regularly.
Okay, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll wrap things up for today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and rest of your week. So take care, everyone.